2023 in review. This is an interesting one. We do the in review videos at the end of the year, and I do a lot of prep thinking about it. I kind of mull it over, right, for a little bit. What's happened this year? What's the big stuff? Obviously a lot of new cameras, new lenses, all kinds of stuff, right? But there's more to it a lot of the time, and that definitely feels like how 2023 has gone. There's some pretty big stuff actually that has crept in, which the more I thought about it, 2023 has been a pretty big year in the photography and video space. Not only in terms of new launches, which there were loads of, including some really tasty stuff, but also in terms of just trends and the way things are going and the way things are changing. And it's a little bit scary sometimes. It's a little bit scary. I'm talking about AI, basically. It's a little bit scary, but it's very interesting as well. Let's talk about it. Let's look at 2023 as a year in review. So, okay, like I said, there's been a lot of launches this year, right? Big new camera launches. Things like the Nikon Z8, which if you've seen my video, my favorite camera of 2023 was, of course, my favorite camera of 2023. That camera is something extra special. There's something just very lovely about that camera. Things like the Nikon Z8, things like the Panasonic Lumix S5 II, the S5 IIX, beautiful camera. Fix the autofocus. That's quite a big deal just by itself. Things like the A9 III, right? Really big launch. But within that, there's a few kind of extra things. We saw the first global shutter in a mirrorless camera like that. The Sony A9 III features a full global shutter. That is huge, not just for that camera, not just for sports photographers, but for the industry as a whole. It's been done, it's happened, we're here. We're living in the future, and that's really exciting. That's really exciting. If you're not kind of familiar with global shutters and why that's such a big deal, essentially it eliminates a lot of problems that come from how a normal shutter would work. So essentially what's happening is with the global shutter, every pixel on the sensor is being exposed at the same time. So rather than a shutter actually going up and down, where pixels at one part of the sensor will be exposed at a different time to another part, even by such a tiny fraction of a second, if you've got a fast moving subject, it's going to affect the look of it. And of course, we've all seen the famous shot of the golf club, it swings it back and the golf club kind of bends in the photo because of the rolling shutter effect. And that can be kind of subdued, it can be brought down a bit, it's not too much of a problem, but a global shutter removes that problem completely. A global shutter also allows incredibly fast shutter speeds, great flash sync speeds, where essentially you can sync up your flash with any shutter speed. I mean, it's crazy. It is a big deal for the industry as a whole, for photography. So that's super exciting. I also think that the Canon RF 24-105 f2.8 lens is also a big deal, because while that is, an exciting lens and awesome that is able to be made, it really does speak volumes. It's the first lens that for me really highlights what Canon have been saying kind of all this time about the RF mount, right? Which is that it allows them to create different quality than we saw on the EF mount, and that really, arguably, we see elsewhere. I mean, essentially, and I don't know this for sure, but this is based on what Canon have said and then the fact that the 24-105 f2.8 has come out, right? I'm assuming we couldn't have seen the 24-105 f2.8 on the EF mount. This looks like the first case for me where the RF mount really is showcased as, no, this is different. It's not just an upgrade, it's not just a mirrorless version. This is fundamentally different and allows for very exciting things. And this is very exciting. It's not the smallest lens in the world. I underplayed that in my review. I said it's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit bigger than your 24-105. You're right. It's bigger. It's a bigger lens. It's going to be, right? 24-105 2.8. It's going to be bigger. But the fact that that is possible, that's also big for the industry, because that's going to change standards, I think, a little bit as well, right? We think of 24-70 f2.8, 24-105 f4, and that's not true anymore. If there's 24-105 f2.8, that changes things. And of course, one of the biggest things that really came to the forefront this year was AI, right? It's not completely new, but it is everywhere when you look at photography now. So I use it sometimes for photo editing. I've done videos on it this year, Photoshop and Lightroom both have it actually built in now, Photoshop in a big way. We've seen it in photo contests, which is really interesting, actually. I mean, kind of scary because it actually has fooled judges as well. I actually went to a photo exhibition where there was lots of stuff being shown up in London. It was actually hosted by Nikon when I went to the Nikon Z8 launch. And one of the areas was a little room with some strange pictures, if I'm honest. They were designed to be strange, so it's not, I'm not insulting anyone. And it had kind of Mr. Blobby-esque creatures, if you remember Mr. Blobby, at kind of fun fairs, and it was old Polaroids. And they were all created with AI. They were all created to look like old Polaroids with the prompts designed to create a photo where Mr. Blobby is at an old fun fair. All AI art, right? And that prompts a lot of questions about what is art? How much do you need to be involved for it to be art? How much of a human touch does there need to be? And then that kind of goes into photography as well. So of course, in Photoshop, the biggest AI addition was generative fill and generative expand, where you can add and remove things very easily in Photoshop. You can expand a photo out and Photoshop will just fill in areas for you. You can pretty much do whatever you like to a photo and change things dramatically. I've done it. I did videos on how it works and everything that you can do with it. It's really interesting. It's a lot of fun to play around with, but it does kind of ask more questions, right? Where is the line where it stops being photography and starts being art, and how much of a human touch needs to be in there? I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't have any of those answers. I don't have any of them. In fact, thinking about it, it's a difficult one, right? Because it's a really useful tool. And speaking to, for example, a wedding photographer, it can really speed things up and give you better results. So I was speaking to a wedding photographer who took a lovely photo of the bride and groom, and in the background of the shot was a bit of the car park, right? Not a lot you can do about it to get the sun in the right place, to get all the other elements where they want to be, but a bit of the car park, not the best thing. Highlight that in Photoshop, remove cars, generate, done. And it looks probably better than you might be able to do with the clone stamp or with the remove tool. It's just gonna do it for you, and it looks fantastic. The depth of field is correct, the lighting is correct, and then you can move on. And that photo is better for the photographer, it's a faster workflow, and it's better for the bride and groom who now have a lovely photo and they don't even know that that happened. They just have a lovely photo that they're very pleased with, and they never think, oh, it's a shame about the car park. And that is a very useful tool. I'm all for speeding up workflows. I think that's really important. It's just that we probably at some point have to decide how far we're willing to go with this and still call it photography, and how we're willing to use it both ourselves as photographers and then also, within the confines of competitions and things like that, and how we're going to police that. Because AI art won some competitions this year where the judges were completely fooled. And it was only when the award was given out that the winner actually said, you know what, this was AI, I did this deliberately to be a bit provocative and I wanted to see what would happen, and I won. And that's really interesting, a little bit scary, and a very different space to something that I think we're used to in this kind of photography sphere. So, okay, let's get into a little bit of what actually specifically happened in 2023. Lots and lots of new cameras. Like I mentioned before, the S5 II, the S5 IIX, beautiful cameras, autofocus is fixed. That makes that a fantastic option. Hybrid camera, great for video. Unbelievable image stabilization as well. We saw some new additions from Canon as well, so things like the R50, which is a great camera for someone looking to get into photography, kind of entry-level stuff, and the R8 as well, which I could see using as a second camera, to be honest. Couple of things from Leica as well. The M6 re-release, so if you're looking for a nice film camera, that's an interesting one to look at. And of course the Q3. Difficult not to love a Leica camera. Very difficult not to love a Leica camera. I liked using the Q3. It was a lot of fun. Oh, the way they feel, Oh, it's ridiculous. They're very, very nice. Now, Sony, we've touched it with the A9 III, but looking back at the year, there's so much that came out. ZV-1 Mark II, if you're into vlogging, there you go. ZV-E1. That was a camera that I didn't expect to love as much as I did. I love that camera. And there was a point this year, I said this in the My Favorite Camera of 2023 video as well. There was a point this year where I genuinely almost upgraded to the ZV-E1, which is not something I would ever have expected, but it is lovely. It's lovely to use. I could imagine using it for these videos, Great for kind of run and gun stuff as well. There's a lot to like about that camera. We saw the A7C Mark II, the A7CR as well, fantastic travel options. Of course, the A6700 as well, lovely APS-C camera. And then of course, the A9 III, so loads from Sony. They are just going for it, and you love to see it, to be honest. You love to see it. It feels like they're just pushing things, right? Their APS-C side of things now up to the kind of current generation of Sony cameras. The ZV-E1, a really interesting mix of content creator kind of camera with the ZV range, and then actually the kind of camera that I would use. A really, really awesome blend of those two things. The A9 III with the global shutter, the travel cameras with the A7C II and the A7CR. It's really impressive. Of course, Fujifilm came out with the new GFX 100 Mark II, and that is quite the camera. If you want ultimately some of the best image quality that you can get, but now in a new package, which is just easier to handle, much more usable, better out and about, right? You don't always need to have a tripod. You don't have to do it in the studio. It's just very, very usable, better autofocus, very, very nice camera. And really, you know, medium format, Fujifilm call it large format, but we get it. Medium format, you really can't kind of get much better than that in terms of image quality. Do you need 100 megapixels? No, of course you don't. None of us do. But do you want 100 megapixels? That's a very different question. And of course, the Nikon Z8, I already said it in the My Favorite Camera video, my favorite camera of 2023. It is such a strong contender. It's just such a good all-rounder, a great, incredibly versatile hybrid camera that is just very able to excel in every area, right? If you shoot video and photo, it's a no-brainer. It just works so well. Great autofocus, unbelievable image stabilization. The image quality is fantastic. The low light capability is fantastic. It's just very, very good. And I can imagine at some point, we'll have to see. We'll have to see. Is that the camera that I finally upgrade to? We will have to see. Of course, loads of lenses as well that came out throughout the year from Sigma, Sony, Canon, of course, OM System. I mentioned a lens at the beginning of the video, but we did see some really notable lenses from Canon, for example. So the RF 100-300 f2.8 lens. So much lighter than you would expect, so much more hand-holdable, awesome zoom lens with a very fast aperture. It's very impressive. And of course, the RF 24-105 f2.8, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video, arguably changes certain things within the industry. It makes it a really interesting case, not only for the RF mount and what it's actually genuinely able to do, but also what we should expect going forward. That's a really interesting lens. And just to dive back towards photo editing as well, obviously I've touched on Photoshop with generative fill, generative expand. There's also a great new remove tool in Photoshop, which works unbelievably well. If you just need to remove something from your photo, we did a tutorial on that, which I'll link down in the description so you can check that out if you want to. But also in Lightroom, we've seen some massive changes, massive updates with new tools like the lens blur effect, which is great. Some new ways to color correct as well, color grade. And of course, denoise, right? Which is such a useful thing to have in there. It works so well. It feels like I've been using that for years, but it actually only happened this year and it is such a useful tool. I have now used that with high ISO images where there's just a bit too much noise. Fixed, done, so good. I think photography and video as well is in probably the strongest position it's ever been in. When I think about it from the perspective of if someone was just learning it now, someone's getting into it now, it's crazy. Not only the opportunities that you would have, the way the cameras work now, it's so easy to just get going, start with the content, actually make things, create things. It's so impressive. I think, yes, we're in a little bit of a scary space with some things like AI, but if it's used in the right way, it's just going to be a very nice tool to add to all the amazing tools we have. And I cannot wait to see what happens in 2024. Things are just moving quickly now. Oh, it's a big one. It's just an exciting time. What was your favorite moment of 2023? What are you excited about going into 2024? Are you concerned about things like AI? I'd love to hear your opinions and all that stuff. Let me know down in the comments, because it's really interesting. Otherwise, I hope you've had a good year. I feel like I have had a good year, actually. I feel like I've had a good year. But I'm looking forward to 2024. Happy New Year for the new year. I will see you on the other side. I'm very excited about it. Lots of content planned, lots of stuff coming. I'll see you then. But as always, thanks for watching.